Thanks to everybody who joined us this morning. I have a tentative agenda up on the screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. Sometimes this new laptop, the print is pretty small. But I'd like to look at duplicate account procedure, as well as looking at lost in transit, some changes to that document. And also look at the website to see what changes we need to make in regards to circulation policies or just additional documents that you'd like to see on the website. Feel free to interject at any time. We want as much participation as possible, so don't be shy. I didn't get minutes put together from the last meeting, but I will get that done and posted, and then we can approve those along with the minutes from this meeting at our next meeting. So in our last meeting, we talked about duplicate accounts, and we also started the discussion on lost in transit. So what I did was I tried to take that discussion and implement it into a document. And I'll get your feedback on what you think. I'll bring up the duplicate patron account procedure. So basically, I just put some verbiage in at the top. My thought is that we could incorporate these two sections, both on duplicate patrons and also inactive barcodes, into a patron policy composite document so that all of the patron policies are kind of together, is my thought process. Don't know what the rest of you think, but I don't want things too strung out. I want people to be able to find the policies kind of all in one place. And so this is just a draft policy. Basically, are you able to read that okay? Or should I read it out loud?
It's pretty small on my screen. It'd be nice if you read it, I think.
Okay. All right. And maybe for future meetings, I'll use my older laptop where the font size is bigger, and make that adjustment. I do it for training, so I can do it for meetings as well. All right, duplicate patron account procedure. This is typically needed when a patron has moved. Students can have a student card and a public library card. A patron should not have multiple public library accounts, and by default, their patron card should be that of the library that is closest to the city where they physically reside. So that's the first paragraph. Any concerns about that? Okay. When registering a new patron, a check should be done on the system to see if a record already exists for the patron, making sure that the search is Sage-wide and includes inactive patrons. Any concerns about that one? Okay. So this next section, I've put if a record already exists. My thought was, and because I'm not behind the cert desk all the time and I don't know what you guys do, my assumption was that you don't create a new record and then try to merge them together. You would just update the record that exists. Is that truly the case?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I know things happen, and sometimes you might not have found a match, but find a match later. And so I cover that in a later paragraph about merging them. So anyway, if a record exists, I indicate that you should update the current record to reflect the new home library, new barcode, current address, and contact information. And then I add, I don't know, this is probably not happening, but I think it would be a good thing to happen, is to add a note to the record indicating the date and reason for change on the record along with the balance due at the time of change. I think it just helps to have a historical perspective and kind of a little trail of what has happened to the record. What do the rest of you think?
I like the idea of adding the note. And just for the record, in Umatilla County, up till now, we have been creating a whole new record, calling the other library, having them delete the old record. Just so you know what we have been doing in the past.
Okay. How do the rest of you feel? Do you think that this is a potential problem? I mean, I do indicate, one of the things we discussed at the last meeting was making up a little spreadsheet of who wanted to be contacted and who didn't care to be contacted if a new card was being issued to this particular patron. I need to send out a survey to get that information. But once I receive the information, then there'll be a chart below that indicates who needs to be contacted and who doesn't need to be contacted. And the main reason was if people have physical registration slips that need to be removed.
Beth, this is Maggie.
Yeah.
I think this just sounds really smart. I think this is really great that this is going to be uniform for everybody.
Okay. So is everybody pretty much okay with changing the existing record rather than adding a new one if we follow through with contacting the former library if they want to be contacted?
I think along with the note and the contacting, if they want to be contacted, it's fine. Like you said, it keeps the continuity. And I think in some ways it's better than merging. Just because, one, you don't have to re-enter it, and two, there's that initial start date. And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I would say, like here, we don't issue a new card if they are over $5. We ask them to take care of that before we issue them a new card. So, I mean, that could be library to library, I would think, because they wouldn't be able to check out anyway. Whether or not you want to wait to issue the new card or issue the new card and then say they can't check out.
Yeah, I wondered about that. I know that typically, especially if there's lost materials, you want them to settle up with their former library.
Exactly.
On that, but I didn't know whether to put that in this procedure or not because it is an individual library decision.
Maybe just a reminder that if any of the fines are for lost items, that money needs to go to the library that owned that lost item. Just a reminder in here might be good if this is for staff.
Okay. So, okay, update the current. Okay, so maybe under here, remind the patron that any lost book charges will need to be settled with their former library.
Well, or even more specifically with the library that owned the lost item. We just had someone move from another library and they had lost items that were interlibrary loans, so it's like triple complicated.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
need to be settled with the owning library before any checkouts. Will be allowed. Okay. And Heidi had a note here. Who is going to go back and check for cards that are not completely changed over? Heidi, are you referring to existing duplicates, or what do you mean by not completely changed over? Okay. So, so libraries have changed our cards to theirs, have not completely changed all of the information. So do you have an example of what kind of information? I'm wondering what we need to watch out for. Since I'm not behind the desk, I'm not seeing these situations. Any others? Have you encountered this, and what discrepancies have you seen when this has happened? Yeah, I guess it's just having the staff be careful. Wondering if, okay, update the current record to reflect the new home library, new barcode, current address, and contact information. Is there anything else that needs to be added to this first line as a reminder? Okay. Well, what I'll do, Heidi, is I'll think of maybe some kind of cleanup report that could be run to see if there's discrepancies that we can catch ahead of time, where if their current barcode doesn't match the home library, that kind of thing. Offhand, I don't know of an easy way to catch this, but I'll try to run some reports and see if there's any out there currently that I can track down. So the last paragraph of this section is, if you discover later that a patron has two public library accounts, the old and the new, you can merge the two. And I just indicate, make sure that the lead record, which is the new or current one, has the complete information, i.e. date of birth, email address, etc. It just kind of covers the merge situation. Maybe I should put on here that they also need to add the note if they're merging as well. do you feel it's important to put the person's initials in the note? Because I didn't add that in here, but I do remember seeing it somewhere else.
We always try to initial any notes we put in, so I think probably most other libraries do that as well. Can I add a couple concerns about this?
Yeah.
One is when you replace the barcode, say somebody moved from the Dalles to Pendleton, that Dalles number is inactive, and so in theory, a staff member could make that the active card, say they lost their card. I think here we would encourage them to get a new Pendleton card rather than do that, but it's possible to do that. And then you would see those mismatches between a barcode and a city that didn't go together. And it could be, just because that library let them use their old inactive card and marked it active. Just something to think about.
Yeah, I think we can address that in the inactive barcode section next, because
okay.
I was thinking about that too. I don't have an issue with if that library barcode was issued by that library and they want to reactivate it, but I would have more issues if they wanted to reactivate a barcode from another library. So,
right.
Yeah. So we can look at that and maybe make some changes to this next section.
Okay, and then my second one was the library to go and keeping, like, this will keep your SAGE record all consistent, but I believe, and Heidi probably knows this, because that you need to let somebody know if somebody wants to keep their library to go record consistent, even if it's just a new barcode at the same library.
The library to go card would only be impacted if you merge two records, right?
My understanding is that even if you get any new barcode, whether it's at the same library or a different library, you would lose your holds and stuff if you tried to log in with the new one. That's only
if you change that barcode on the OPAC. So there's two fields, and if you don't change the second field, then they can still use their old card for library to go.
Right. That seems confusing to a lot of people, but anyway, just another issue to work through.
Okay, so Heidi, what's the procedure for getting your library to go holds and checkouts transferred to a new library card number? That automatically doesn't happen, huh? So you would have possibly some checkouts under an old number and then a whole new checkout queue in a new record. I mean, a new barcode. I guess I mean, this happens a lot. So just wondering about logistics with Library to Go. You have to contract Overdrive customer sorts. Okay. All right. So it's not a huge deal for most people, because they would just finish out their holds under the old number, and then any new holds would be placed under the new number. But they'd have two different accounts to monitor for a little while. So now that I know the procedure, how easy is it for them to contact customer support? I guess I'm wondering whether we need to provide links somewhere for them to access this, or how can we facilitate them not getting frustrated by this process? So Heidi's saying it's a web form. So is this something that we just need to have available for patrons at the Circ desk when they're issued a new card and they've already had a card and used Library to Go?
Yeah, I think that information would be useful.
So yeah, if somebody could send me that link so that I have it, since I haven't used it before. Maybe it's something that we can also put somewhere on the website. Oh, Heidi's got it right there. Okay. So should we add something in here about that? Yeah, probably. Okay. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Okay, so I think I've got it. If the patron has used Library to Go in the past and wants to transfer their existing holds and checkouts to the new barcode, they can do this through Overdrive support by filling out the form located at, and then the address. How does that look? I can see I have a couple different fonts going on in this document, so I'll fix that later. But just want to make sure that the text is what we want.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Got to spell here right. All right. So do we think we have enough information in this process to move on to talk about inactive barcodes. My thought was that if we're once we come up with something that we're pretty happy with, that I would send it out to the listserv for further review for folks that weren't able to attend today. And then it would be something that would be, if we want to adopt it as a formal policy, then it would be brought before the council for a vote. Does that procedure sound okay? Okay, the next section is about inactive barcodes, and I separated this out because it's kind of a separate process from the whole registration of a patron. It's more of a history. And we had some good back and forth discussion, you know, the pros and cons of keeping the inactive barcodes. The reality is in order to completely get rid of a barcode being associated with a particular patron, it's a database level change. And so it's a little bit more logistically difficult for staff members to do it, obviously. And there were some good reasons for keeping them for historical purposes. And so the decision was made to retain them, but we want to also give some cautions with that. So I indicate here we are currently retaining inactive or replaced barcodes on the patron's account for historical purposes until the patron's account is actually deleted. At that point, they go away. They can't be used by anybody. So we decided that it was a good idea that if a patron provides a card at checkout that comes up with the message account retrieved with inactive card, that you should request ID to maybe not validate, verify the patron. Might want to change the language there. Basically, we're wanting to make sure that the patron is who they're who they say they are, and somebody isn't using somebody else's card. So do we want to say anything more at that point? Is request ID sufficient?
I think that's sufficient. Each library is probably going to have their own kind of threshold of,
Yeah.
you know, how many people they don't know by face, and like with kids, you know, I might ask them, what's your birth date, or something like that, if they're not carrying in a driver's license with them, obviously.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and I added in here and checked to see what happened to their new card. Is that necessary? Or, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's like, okay, why aren't they using their new card? You know, did they lose it? But I want to see what the rest of you think.
We encourage them to try to find their newest card, and, you know, we'll have them check out that day, but maybe tell them, look for the card with these last 4 digits or something like that before, you know, just automatically making that one the active one.
Okay, so you give it a space of time to see if they can locate their new card.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have a note in here. If the old barcode was associated with the current home library, it can then be reactivated. I should put if desired, maybe. And the other barcode deactivated. I guess I can put in here if the inactive barcode was associated with another home library, then a new barcode should be issued if they can't locate their new card. And maybe I should make these bullet points rather than... Sometimes when too much verbiage is in a paragraph, they all kind of blend together.
I think the system will let you have more than one active number. It's like there's a primary and an active box to check.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone else uses that, but it seems like it might be helpful for some patrons, like if they're allowing someone else to always pick up their holds or something like that. We don't do that now, but I could see where it could be useful.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just trying to think through the potential implications. I have seen that where more than one barcode is active. Most of the time I see it with student accounts where they're given a temporary barcode initially, as a part of a batch load of patrons, and then a real barcode is assigned later. So there's the potential that the patron would have checkouts at any given time under two different barcodes. Not really a problem for the system. So it's associated with the same account, so they're not going to be able to do more checkouts or, have fines, more latitude on fines. So I don't see any problems there. So should we change the language in here about deactivating the other one?
I wouldn't change it. I think you would generally want to do that when you're if they're, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but I think that's a good practice in general, unless at your library you regularly are letting people have two active barcodes, and then I think that's fine. My only concern with that would again be the security. Just like if somebody pays for a replacement, somebody else finds their inactive card, they assume it's just gone because they gotta, so they don't. Or if it's actually stolen and they come and let you know it's stolen, we'll put a note in like, do not use any inactive cards or something like that.
Yeah, which is a good thing to do if you know it's stolen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other additions to this document before I send it out to the general listserv for further review? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and save the changes I made to this so far. And then we can move on to the lost policy draft that I came up with. Okay, the original policy was drafted way back in 2003. And basically what it was doing was just dividing the responsibility. Well, basically, the first paragraph, if an item is checked out to a patron who does not respond to notices sent, it's the responsibility of the patron's home library to collect the cost from the patron for reimbursement to the owning institution. So that's pretty straightforward. What we might want to do, I just realized that and hadn't thought about it before the meeting, was we might want to establish a time frame on this particular section as well. Just so the owning library is not hanging out there forever, waiting for this reimbursement in order to replace their material. So any suggestions on a time frame by which, if we haven't, if you haven't gotten the replacement cost from the patron, at what point does the library step in and pay the owning library? I don't know, 6 months kind of jumps into my mind because I know that the lost process and sending out notices takes a little while. But what do the rest of you think? So has this happened very often in your library, where the borrowing library has had to pay you back for an item because they didn't get the amount from the patron?
I honestly only ever see it when the patron does pay the amount, and that's when, the check is sent to us. I think maybe I've only seen one library do it for something that hadn't come back yet.
Okay.
This is Perry at Baker. We regularly do that. Go ahead and pay for a lost item if we're having trouble getting collection from the patron. And then continue to work on getting that patron to pay. But we'll go ahead and pay the owning library anyway.
So what format are you using to find those items? Your overdues or a report or?
At Baker, I don't think it's been very consistent as a process.
Just like when you notice one or?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I added, if after 6 months the patron has not paid maybe these lost charges rather than any, the borrowing library should pay the owning library this amount. Any changes to that language. So
Maybe
Rose, oh,
put
go ahead.
the requested amount or the negotiated amount.
Okay.
A lot of times the default amount, the item is depreciated. It can be acquired at a lower cost than what the item record has.
That's true, Perry. Yeah, that's a good point. To pay the owning library the negotiated amount.
That sounds fine.
Okay, and Rose was indicating that they've paid when other libraries have invoiced them. So, it can kind of work both ways as far as who instigates the process. I'm wondering, from a reporting standpoint, whether we should generate another automatic report for things that have not been paid after 6 months.
Well, how would that work? Because if the library pays it, then the fee would still be on the patron record until they pay it. So I don't know where you would get.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
There might, maybe a note should be added to the patron record.
Absolutely. So you don't, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen, but so you don't end up paying the other library twice if the patron comes in and your library's already paid for it too.
Okay, say the borrowing library pays whatever the negotiated amount is after 6 months. The owning library uses that money to replace the item. I guess the item would be added with a new barcode and everything, so they would have 2 copies potentially under the same bib. Okay. Just trying to think of any reason that they want to get rid of that lost item because it had been paid for.
Well, I believe our catalogers automatically delete stuff that's been lost for over 6 months anyway, so they would probably be deleting those records, even before the replacement money came in.
Yeah, that gets problematic when you delete an item that has an outstanding CERC policy involved. It normally gives you, it warns you that it's not in an ideal state to delete. So what some libraries have done, and this is what I'm not sure what everybody's doing, is sometimes they actually check that item in and delete it and then add a charge to the patron's record.
Interesting.
Reflecting that so that it's not tied up in the catalog, but they still have that charge to the patron. And so I was wondering if in this situation where the library is actually paying for it rather than the patron, it might be good to kind of make that as a separate charge to the patron.
So it's not tied to that book anymore. It would have to have a note. Yeah, that would work.
What do the rest of you think?
If that item is deleted, that seems like it could be problematic, creating confusion if there is a trail of that item being checked in.
Yeah, that's true. If they find it and check it in, then it's
the system's going to reverse the charge on that. Maybe in the billings, you're going to see, that was checked in and the billings were reversed. It just seems like more of a mess.
Okay. So let's just leave things the way they are, but let's ask folks to add a note when the library pays for it, so that there's a trail of something being paid for by somebody. So I just added a note should be added to the patron record indicating that the library paid for the item along with the date and amount. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that seems good for now. I think, ideally Sage would have resources to bill the libraries and collect the money and track that all and have it centrally accessible in some kind of a spreadsheet database or something, but I don't think Sage has that kind of resource capacity.
Well, if the desire is to go that way, we might be able to make it happen via reports that could update a table. But the thing is, we don't know what kind of... Okay, say that we create these billings. We're not going to know when money is received.
Well, if it came to
if it was like a PayPal account where it came to a central
repository, say
Okay.
Someone like Christine.
Yeah, that's something to investigate. I mean, I think that there was something else we talked about, utilizing that technology. Oh, I think it was if we wanted to use a central account for receiving overdue, so that not every library had to have a separate PayPal account in order to receive money.
Right.
We set up a general PayPal account and then split out the money accordingly. So yeah, we could incorporate this into that same logic if we decide to go that route.
Mm-hmm. It's just a big bookkeeping job, it seems like.
It is, and a good discussion, I think, amongst libraries to see, maybe that's something we can bring up for the annual meeting to see what, how folks feel about that. See what potential fiscal issues they would see as a hazard for that. But yeah, I think it's a good discussion. Because, I mean, the technology is there within Evergreen to have online payment, and I keep getting questions from patrons, can I pay my bill online? And it's like, well, not yet, unless your library has it set up. So I would love to move forward with it. And if having a general account makes that easier, it's worth investigating anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make a note to see if we can put that on the agenda for the annual meeting at the beginning of June.
And it would be good to have an idea of how many lost and unpaid items there are out there that are interlibrary loan items.
Okay. So you want a report narrowed down to ILL items? Okay.
I think that's what we were talking about, wasn't it?
Well, it is in this case, but I'm thinking that, you know, with the PayPal account, we were looking at broader.
True. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess those were two different things.
Yeah, two different things. Okay. So that I think covers this first section, which is basically dealing with a checkout that's gone on too long and needs to be dealt with as far as lost charges go. If the item is lost in transit before reaching its destination library, so what we've done is if it gets lost before it reaches the destination library, then the owning institution is responsible for the cost if it never gets found. And if it's on its way back from the borrowing library is responsible for the item's cost. Long time ago, this is just how we split the responsibility, just so the owning library wasn't having to cough up replacement in both instances. Is there any objection to leaving that split responsibility in place?
That seems fine. It doesn't address anything about a claim with the courier company, though.
It does not. There are so many different ways that items are couriered. If it's the Orbis Cascade Courier, yes, a claim for payment, could be submitted. The difficulty we have is that there is not.
We don't know at what point in the baton passing
Correct.
that the item goes missing.
Correct. Right. When we implemented the new Orbis Courier vendor switch, I had dreams of actually being able to track by barcode what bag things were in. Because the barcodes, because the bags, the labels are barcoded, I thought about trying to find a way to actually indicate which barcodes were in a particular barcoded bag. And then we would have knowledge of when something got lost in transit, whether that bag was received with a certain barcode in it. There is a way to add barcodes in a note field that gets tracked, but it's an additional layer of work that the ILL staff to do. It's something I'll probably bring up at the courier meeting. But anyway, that's a separate issue. I just wanted to kind of let you know that I was thinking about that in case we wanted to. And if we needed to file a claim with the courier, we would have more information to do it. At this point, I don't know that we could. Your thoughts, Perry?
Yeah, I can see their disclaimer. That would be their defense.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, well, you know, just because this item was put in transit between this library and this library doesn't mean it was in one of the bags that we picked up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can see their perspective. So at this point, I don't know that we can claim through the courier for things that are lost in transit. Okay, so we might be able to add claim language later if we find that we can actually submit claims because we know exactly where those books were and at what time. For now, I just tried to add some time frames in here so that we had more structure and could get these items dealt with so that they're not sitting in transit forever. So I wanted to see what you thought. The new language is in blue on the document, and basically the first bullet just says, once an item has been in transit for 30 or more days, both libraries involved should attempt to locate the item by checking their shelves. How's that sound?
That sounds good. Some libraries, I'm not sure which one, but some have not even like very minimal library item markings. It seems like maybe we should also have some kind of a standard of what that would be so that it's a recognizable item. Like, isn't there one that doesn't even barely have a spine label? I'd have to ask our CERC staff, our ILL staff. But some are kind of difficult to tell that it's a library book.
Oh, okay. So those kind of books would be really obvious on your own shelf because they would look so different. But then if they barely have a spine label, locating them might be difficult too.
Yeah, they might get in with the donations.
Ooh, that's not good.
Right.
Okay, so Rose is saying she's had an item or two from Klamath Falls Community College ending up on our donated pile before she caught them.
Exactly.
So is this because folks are not using the removable ILL label?
Those don't always come
They don't-
back with them with the label on.
Patron take them off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or I don't think they'll fall off unless they get a lot of rubbing, but okay. I'm trying to figure out what we can really do about that.
Well, I think Sage had a standard of expected markings to show that it was a library item. Some like a minimal stamping, stickering.
Yeah, which is a whole nother policy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something I should note, and maybe we talk about it at the cataloging level, since that's is part of processing.
Maybe. Yeah, it's kind of a technical services department, which cataloging would be. CERC it's also in the CERC department. It could be either way.
Okay. So talk about minimum standards for spine labels. Because that's really where it is, right? Or are you talking about stamping, like inside stamping, library identification?
Yes, I think it might be both.
Okay. This is a new issue that I hadn't encountered, so I'm glad you brought it up. Spine labels and library stamp. Okay. Okay. So the next bullet is if the item is not found, an email should be sent to the SAGE listserv asking libraries to check their shelves in case the item was delivered to the wrong location. Any changes to that? I might be more specific about the listserv, and I had a question to you folks. Right now, I think those emails are when they're being sent to Sage Lib. Wondering if that is an issue or whether they need to be sent to the Sage Circ listserv. So not all the staff are seeing it, just potentially Circ staff. Should we keep it on Sage Lib?
I don't think Sage Lib is so used that it would be a burden.
Yeah, it's kind of where I was. If it changes, we might have to revisit that. But at this point, we're not sending out a ton of messages.
Right.
So I was okay with leaving it on Sage Lib. I just wanted to see what other folks felt. So I might change that to actually give the name of the Sage listserv rather than leaving it generic. And then the next bullet is if the item still cannot be located after an additional 30 days, the owning institution is responsible for the item's cost. And then the other way, if the item is lost in transit on its way back, it's the same language as above, just repeated. And then the borrowing institution is responsible for the item cost after that additional 30 days. If we feel this is a good draft, what I can do is just save it and send it out to the listserv for review by everyone else who's interested. And do we want to revisit it at the next CIRC meeting? With any feedback that we've gotten via the listserv?
That sounds good to me. I have one question. Say we implement this policy, how far back will we go in this? Because when I looked at the long transit list, there are ones that are many, many years old, both directions, our books and books that were on their way to us. And so I think rather than paying up all those old ones, it might be good to go forward in this manner. I'm not sure what other people think.
I generally agree with that. I think the longer something is lost in transit, the more difficult it might be to trace it. I think it's worth seeing if we can get them cleaned up. But as far as exchanging money, there probably should be a point at which we move forward on the new policy. What do the rest of you think?
Sorry, I didn't hear what the question was.
Oh, basically, for things that have been in transit for maybe years, let alone 60 days. You know, we're talking about items that just have never been resolved. They've been in transit for a long time. Do we still settle up financially for those really long transit, or do we just move forward from this point on once the policy is adopted and exchange money at that point under the new policy? Or revised policy, because the policy's been in place all along. It's just never had any time frames associated with it. Maybe this is something we bring up at the council. You know, I indicate the changes, the potential changes to the document, and talk about finances. What do you think, Perry?
I think we would have to have a vote because we're talking about the property of the various members. So I don't think Sage really has the authority to make that waiver without some due process.
Okay. So this could be reviewed at, you know, the draft policy changes could be reviewed at the council meeting that's coming up next week. But then we could also revisit it at the annual meeting and talk about what we want to do with old outstanding potential transit costs. And then we would potentially have a larger base with which to make a decision on that. Okay, I see by our time that we've gone over the hour. I will take care of sending these out to the listserv to get some feedback. Do we want to end the meeting at this point? The only other thing I had on the agenda was to talk about the website and any changes that folks wanted to suggest for the website. But I think what I'll do is just ask for that when I send out the drafts to get some feedback on some improvements we can make to the circulation portion of the website, whether it's a need for more training documents, whether it's a need for policies being regrouped, that kind of thing. So if you have any ideas of this, yeah, please let me know. And anything we wanted to talk before we break up.
How about setting a regular time for meetings?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I was going to talk about that more. Thanks. You know, the results were really divided, and so it was kind of difficult. So I don't know whether we want to rotate, you know, from month to month, having a meeting in the morning versus a meeting in the afternoon. What are thoughts? I want participation.
I'm pretty flexible, but it is helpful to have like a third Thursday at this time for me, and as far as scheduling other things then, so that you could make it to most of them.
Any objection to making it the third Thursday of the month.
Or any other regular time. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would welcome a regular time too, because it helps me in planning. Because we want to do it on a monthly basis, and so the more regular we can make it, the more efficient I feel like it can be.
So this time seemed to work for a lot of people, at least this month.
Yeah.
Third Thursday at 11.
Okay. Well, unless I hear any objections, we can keep this schedule for a while. I'll put down that we'll do it the third Thursday of each month at 11 o'clock. And if the situation changes, please, speak forth, and we'll look at it again. The only thing that might impact if we need to make some kind of decision before a council meeting, having it the third Thursday might impact that, but we can always call a special meeting if that's necessary. So I don't think it's a factor at this point. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.